Hello, and welcome back to Purpose Driven Movement. I'm Vanessa, your host again for today. Can't get enough of me, hopefully. I'm so excited, as always, but definitely today to bring you my friend, John Polley, JP as we call him. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, welcome back. This is cool, and it's been a while since we were able to talk like this, so I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I have had the pleasure of knowing JP for quite a few years now, and I am always in awe of his innovation and creativity in our industry. And so we're going to launch straight in to a really interesting set of topics today, tangents all in, wherever we go with it. The first question that I want to dive into today is, what is the difference between our mind and our brain?
It's a good one, isn't it? And it's one that you can ponder. And by the way, if you Google this, like, people have all got their own version of it. I particularly like that whole thing, that whole area around being sort of above the brain. So it's a collection of thoughts, feelings, and values, and it's a lens through which we interpret the world. And then the brain responds to that mind interpretation with brain and physical responses. So neurochemistry is in play then. So in terms of what physically happens in our body, it's brain, but the interpretation has been mind. So mind is always above the brain, because you can step out and observe the way you're reacting to a situation, can't you? That's mind, isn't it? Brain is the actual reactions going on in your brain and what's set off in your brain down into your body. So there's that distinction there. So for me, it's an interpretive lens, and it picks up on all things, including all that stuff that people choose whether they believe in or not, like energy, for example. But I know when I'm speaking to another human being, my mind is on fire and my brain is responding to what my mind is absorbing from that other person. Because if I look a person in the eye whilst they're talking, I get a whole heap more about who they are than my brain just processing information.
You also get like a physical response to people as well. So it's like that's the kind of the next step, right? If we're just talking about having a conversation with someone, sometimes you meet someone and it's like you can feel the chemistry, and this could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could be anybody. I have this direct memory from this exact moment. I met a girl last year in Italy for training for Techno Gym, and she rushed onto the train. We're on the same train, we're catching it from Bologna to a tiny little town, and we looked at each other and she's like, "You work for Techno Gym?" And I'm like, "You're going to Techno Gym?" And it was like instant best friends. And we haven't stopped like chatting since. And it was almost instantaneous. You just felt like a chemistry. We both had really similar energy. And I feel like you can't ignore those physical responses to that kind of, like you said, that above the mind. Like, that wasn't my head saying you should talk to this person. That was just like all of it all together.
For me, that would be the perfect response. Where I would normally, at the start of a session where we're talking about, what's the mind, brain, body connection, I would normally say to people, "Hey, you know what? Does it exist?" And like everyone will go, "Well, yeah, of course it exists." And I'll say, "How do you know? Tell me a story of how you know." Now, in that moment where you had that sudden response to a person you started communicating, there would have been a whole heap of responses in the inside of your body that were just lighting you up. Would I be right?
100%. Yeah, it's interest and it's curiosity, and it's not quite validation, but there's a reciprocity, right? That you can feel what's happening inside you, and you can see it almost mirrored in that other person as well.
So that's a whole heap of chemical reactions created by your mind.
It's pretty cool. Okay, so let's continue down this path. Why is this important when we're exercising?
So here's the thing. So if that's the case, we've got, that was an external example. Something external to you create a whole heap of neurochemicals in all over your body. But then, how did you know that was happening? Well, because you felt all the stuff in your body, right? So what's the other way? So the other way around is what you feel in your body goes to your brain. Your mind kind of interprets what's going on there, and then, is in cahoots with the brain and says, we kind of need to respond like this to this. So in that case, if there are physical responses that happen in your body to a whole heap of stuff, physical stuff, mental stuff, emotional stuff, all the physical systems of the body, energetic stuff as well. If we've got all of that going on and we have physical responses happening in our body, isn't it important to manage our physical responses for better performance when it comes to something as physical as exercise? And for me, there's a massive elephant in the room when it comes to us training human beings rather than human bodies. And that is that our entire focus is physical input, physical response. And we don't even allow for any other systems and any other things beyond those physical systems, i.e., brain responses and emotions, to actually have their say in what goes on there. But they are ridiculously important if you are looking for results. And I'll pause there because I'm sure you've got other questions, because rather than just go for 35 minutes and tell you all the other bits and bobs, I'll let you guide me.
Well, that in itself, I think this is what I love about learning from you, and just even our general conversations, is the fitness industry was founded and is generally still classified as almost like a vanity first industry. It's a physical first industry. And when we start to talk about mind, body, or brain, or whatever you want to call it, everyone kind of puts that into some like woo-woo category, as if it's like some separate entity, or that's for yogis, or that's not science, or that, you know what I mean? It's this whole thing that's like, we're just going to sweep that under the rug because looking at my emotions doesn't make me feel comfortable. So I'm not going to go there. Why do you think that there's let's not go there. Why do you think it's important that we stop sweeping that under the rug as the first part? And how can we start to positively impact our performance in the gym by looking into it?
So for me, there's like, I've got probably 3 answers already lined up for that. So first of all, we know that physical responses are happening in the body to all sorts of inputs, including the physical inputs. And what we can't do, there's a reason, even in scientific studies where they're doing, is this is the physical thing. We've managed out all the variables. So we're just testing this physical thing to see the responses. In amongst those responses, even if there is a correlation shown, there's this thing, okay, then we generally get this result as a result of doing this thing. Therefore, it's science, and we can tell the exercise industry that it is. So do that exercise, and it produces this response. In those responses, they're not all on the 55th percentile. There's a range of responses. Why do you think that is? Well, it depends on how they turned up that day to do their testing, right? Were they hydrated? Were they stressed? Had they had an emotional incident just beforehand? Were they just off the back of exam results that were the best exam results they've ever had? Had they just met the person of their dreams the night before? All of those things will affect the response. So you get hyper responders and hypo responders, and then there's that big swathe of people in between that are basically have a general all rightness throughout all categories, right? So that's how we get the different responses. All those different responses are due to all the other factors that we're looking to physically affect. So don't we all want to be dealing with hyper responders to whatever we're doing? I know I do. And there I could go off, and I've got a separate service called Safe Space to Grow, which is for mindset coaching, right? I want people to get the best results from their mindset coaching sessions with me. So guess what? I start my mindset coaching things with a couple of physical things. to bring them into the present and actually to set their physical body up so that there's less tension in their physical body, so that their brain can just come with me into a flow state, and we can literally brainstorm mind to mind, not brain to brain, mind to mind, so that we get the best results for them for that as well. And how the mech that we're using for that is our interoceptive network, our proprioceptive network, or exteroceptive network, our interoceptive network, that heap of nerve endings that sit in our fascial tissue that tells us how things are doing, plugged into every organ. By the way, there's 7 times more than proprioceptors in our fascial tissue, right? Ness is nodding to all this, by the way, because she knows this stuff. There's a lot of interoceptors, but they're in, they're in all your organs. They'll tell you, you quieten yourself and you listen. You listen, i.e., you listen with your mind. You will sense your heartbeat. You'll know whether you're thirsty. You'll know whether you're fatigued. You know if there's tension in the system, or distension. So you've eaten something wrong and your gut's all inflamed. There's this bloating. Those sensations are all interoception. Whether your tissue health is good, all the way through to your intuition and your emotional state that is carried on your interoceptive network. And I'm going to pause again there, just in case you want to ask, but I know that I'm hoping that you're at some point going to go, well, why is that even important? But I'm going to let you do this because you're the interviewer.
Well, I definitely let's take a side note there. You mentioned fascia. You mentioned 3 types of ceptions: proprioception, exteroception, interoception.
Yeah.
Let's start by, if you had to summarize fascia for people who've never heard of it before, if you had to summarize that, I'm gonna time you because I know what you're like. 2 minutes. If you had to summarize what it is, max 2 minutes. Go from there. Let's talk about fascia first.
All right. So it's everything in your body that's not a cell. So it's the extracellular matrix, and it contains everything else in our body, and it's joined to everything, and makes up your human shape. All the nerve endings, all the muscles, all the organs, they're all held in place. Fascia. So it's the largest organ in your body from that point of view, and it connects to everything else and carries signals between everything and everything else.
Okay. That's perfect lead into my next question. And my next question is, okay, let's talk about proprioception first. Yeah. If we're in the fitness industry, if you've been training at gyms, you would have heard this word before. What does it actually mean?
So it's where you are in time and space.
Where my body is in time and space?
Where you are in time and space. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're viewing this on video, you can see that both of us are, in a room, and my elbow is now at 90 degrees for some strange reason, and it's sitting there in front of my face, and then I'm going to bring it back down. That's proprioception, right?
Yeah, you have that awareness of where that is, and you're accurate in doing that because you've trained your proprioceptive system over time by, well, in your case, physical training plus living until you're the age that you are. We've got that, and sometimes when our networks start breaking down, we have poorer proprioception, don't we? And we have a brain injury, we have poorer proprioception, so we start falling over more. We have a decline as we age. Hopefully not us, but some people have a decline as they age in their physical tissues, and their proprioceptive goes, and that's why fall prevention is so important in older people. So that's proprioception. You can train proprioception, or you can live well, and proprioception doesn't decline anywhere near as fast anyway.
Great. What is exteroception?
So that's your exteroceptors tell you what's happening on the outside of you. So, you're wandering along and you're barefoot and you go, well, what was that? That exteroceptor will tell you that, oh, it's that little sharp pebble that was under your foot. Or if you're like me, I'm on the sand the other day, going into the ocean, I'm striding in, heroically, of course, because, that's the way I walk. So I'm heroically striding, and then suddenly it's like, what the hell? And it's like this intense pain just before I stepped into the water. I carried on, but I'm like, something's not right. Luckily, I was with a friend, and so I floated and brought my foot up, and I said, he's like, I've got a feeling I might have just been stung. And sure enough, I must have drawn on a big old bee sting sticking out the bottom of one of my toes, right? Interoceptors were telling me that. But then some of the pain stuff, that was interoceptors, right? Because there was some stuff. And then there was the tightening of my tissues as it swelled up, where there's interoception again, right? So exteroception, what's happening on the outside of you? How is it affecting you? Proprioception, where you are in time and space. Interoception, your internal environment, what's going on in there.
Okay. Why, we're looking at that internal environment. We generally have to quieten down, like you said, to kind of figure that out. When you have a trainer, or when a trainer is saying, I want you to turn on your glute, I want you to turn on, etc., would you classify that as proprioception or interoception?
I'd classify that as command that I don't understand in the first place, because if you're putting people through great body positions, whether it turns on or not is dependent upon whether you're in a position where it needs to turn on or not. However, I would put that in the interoception vein, purely because it's like, okay, then you've got to go, okay, then where is that in my body, and how do I send the signals to that area, and then get that to effectively squeeze. If you're in any doubt about whether great glute activation is important, if you squeeze both your glutes on and then try and go for a walk, that will tell you that it's just as important for them to switch off too.
That was one of my favorite exercises that we ever did. It was really funny watching a room full of people trying to walk with their butt cheeks squeezed.
Yeah,
you can try it. If you're listening right now, pause, because it's really quite entertaining. So aside the point there, let's go a little deeper into interoception and how is it related to physical performance?
Yeah, so you've got poor tissue health, your hydration's down, you feed yourself not the best of nutritional diets, so the tissue health isn't that great. Maybe you spend a lot of time in awkward positions, keep it clean less, and therefore you have areas of restriction and areas of overextension. So your interoceptive network is going to be feeding that information back to the brain saying, do you know what? Our organs aren't very happy because it's having to deal with a whole lot of stuff. Our lymphatic system is clogged. And nutritionally, where, our gut is inflamed. And then we've got these restrictions. Generally, interoception will feed back to the brain saying that this isn't all that. It's not a great environment to be in. So on top of that, if people are dealing with a whole heap of that will affect them emotionally. So a lot of people can be quite happy in their kind of in their pain, as it were, but nowhere near as happy as if their bodies felt free and easy and comfortable. They're really, really happy in their own skin. That's not just a thing about people being happy being themselves. That's people being happy in their physical body, right? So there we have it. So your interoceptive network in the brain, the interoceptive networks in your brain, they respond to all things coming from your internal environment. So it could be that you're having lots of laughs and jokes. You get the rush of chemicals that goes with that. But then you've got all this feedback from the body going, every organ is unhappy. There are restrictions in the body that are causing overextensions in other parts of the body. And then this physical body is trying to do this stuff that really requires a lot of energy and focus when we've got all these things trying to pull us in other directions. Now, emotions are part of that. So it could be stress or it could be emotional changes along the way. And what they've found is that if you look at the work of Lisa Feldman-Barrett, who's a psychologist who works in that emotional space, there's a particularly good book, How Emotions Are Made. And one of the things that she talks about is the body budgeting regions of the brain. So what that means is that these are predictive systems in the brain that allocate energy according to what's going to be needed, say, that day. Well, if it's got a whole heap of information from your interoceptive network saying physically not very happy, emotionally also, not coping that well, right, that's going to require a certain amount of energy. So we're going to allocate that energy across the day, and this is what you've got left. Okay, that's what you got left for your physical performance or your work performance. And the quote that I remember, and the quote that I quote most often from that book is, when you think about budgeting for energy for the day and you're short on energy in your budget, she says, what are the two most expensive things that a brain can do? Learning something new and moving its body. So in other words, where can it rob most energy from? Your ability to learn and your ability to move. That's where it's going to take it from in order to budget for the day, which is, I remember when I lost my mum, for example. I don't want to bring the thing down, but can you imagine how much energy I gave that? Did I feel much like, leaping for joy around the house and all this freedom in my body? Not so much, right? Because you are much more closer to fetal than anything else, and you are pretty desolate. So of course, there's limited amount of energy left for anything else or anyone else, quite frankly, when you're in those places, right? So that's the entire shutdown. Well, no, I'm not. No, I won't be writing my thesis today. Do you know what I mean? Because that requires me to learn and research, Now, I won't be doing my big heavy sets today, because I've got all this energy going elsewhere. Now, people are living in a constant state of requiring that energy for all these kind of major things in their life. So what is left for the body? So maybe if you help them manage all the systems, both physical, mental, and emotional, outside of your physical training requirement, that's what your job is, well, then you could actually leave them with more energy for their training and therefore better performance during training and better results after training.
I'm going to have to look at this book. I love that analogy of like your mental budget. I've also heard of like your budget, there's like a teaspoon analogy. It takes some people a certain amount of teaspoons. I can't quite remember that off the top of my head. If I'm doing it bad, I apologize to anyone who I've wrecked that analogy for, but everyone can understand a budget.
Yeah,
even
and this
Mike
is body budgeting regions of the brain. So in other words, this isn't just an analogy. This is physical systems in the brain that they've tracked, and the things that affect the interoceptive network heavily. Guess what that is? That's actually your emotional state. Effectively, you're almost like your mood. And I was just listening to a book the other day, The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler, and he talks about what's a great flow trigger. It's being in a good mood, like flow being a high performance state. What's a great trigger for that? A good mood. I mean, it's like boom, straight away, high performance again. Talked about it from a completely different angle. And yet your emotional space is a massive foundational element to whether you can enter these places or not.
Yeah. I want to dive a little deeper into this, but perhaps we can give maybe a practical or a couple of practical examples of this. I've got one that comes to mind really quickly. I have a client, I've been training her for years, and there's like 2 or 3 months of the year where her work demands are obscene. Absolutely nuts. And the first few years that we trained together, we tried to maintain the level of training during that time, and her body broke down immensely. I'm not talking about just pain, I'm talking about injury. And there was a bit of that interoception piece that came back into it, is she had to learn to listen to her body a little bit more because she was giving so much of her energy to her work. She wanted to give her energy to her movement because that was important to her, but there wasn't anything there. And so the last few years, more post-COVID, that we know that this is happening because it's the same months of the year. Our training has to take a step back. So regardless of where she is, what her goals are, she knows now, but also I know, and that feedback loop between us is really, really good. There's that constant communication. That training takes a step back. And I think a lot of people are hesitant to take a step back and away from their training because they feel like it's a failure, or they're not doing enough, or all of those kind of shame or guilt responses come into mind. But for her, she gets to keep moving, which helps her mental stress, helps her mental capacity. She doesn't break down. And as soon as that mental stress goes away, she's actually more physically capable. She hasn't actually lost anything. And I just love that example.
Yeah.
Love your thoughts on that.
So, well, it's a perfect example. And also, like, straight away, if you're a woman who has a menstrual cycle, there's your other analogy that you can have when it comes to training females, right? Okay, then is it day one or is it ovulation day in your cycle? Because if you have some form of, what I teach in my next level mentorship is something called a body audit, a next level body audit. So it's just 7 questions that we ask at the start of a session, and it gives us an idea of their state coming into the session and how much they can cope with that day. Well, but generally, around ovulation, we can go hard, and around menstruation, we do not, right? That's a classic interoceptive network response, right? What's telling you that you don't feel that great? Interoceptive network. All right, then. So the information is there for you. What we do have, and what the other thing that kind of sets off in my brain is we've got a whole heap of body that have no connection to their interoceptive network, because the idea, when you say you got to listen to your body, if you are in no way connected to any of our professions, people don't actually know what that means. So they need to be taught what that means. But if you want an example from my world, one of the things that I really like to do is I get people to perform a movement, whatever they want, something that will really tell them, and take an audit of their body. How does it feel during that? Tell me all the bits, where does it pull when you get to a certain point in the movement, and those kind of things. And I get them to choose a movement, but I want their whole body to be doing that. And it can be up on the floor, up on their feet. I don't care what it is. And then what I do is I'll pair people up and I say, one of you is going to make a face, and the other one's got to mimic that face. But they have their arms by their sides, and all they do is mimic each other's faces. So they take turns to mimic it, and there's a lot of laughter, as you can imagine. But there's very little in the way of movement. So what I wanted to do is then show, okay, then if we change their emotional state from wherever they're at, probably a little bit self-conscious at the start, to very positive, happy, laugh. There's a whole heap of kind of cool things that happen, as in basically a cascade of neurotransmitter responses that happen from that. And then I get them to do their movement again. And consistently, 80-85% of the room will move more freely with less discomfort following that. So again, we've got a really simple thing there. And I'm not saying, hey, just pull faces at your clients each one. But what I'm saying is, if you can manage their state, everything changes in terms of their immediate performance and their performance through the session. And when I was teaching last week, I explained to people, yes, I make lots of stupid jokes. And yes, it's part of your experience, because I know that if I can keep you light, you'll be more engaged and you'll be able to learn better. And then you go, well, why? Well, because learning is a huge energy demand. So you need to be in the best state possible. And the funniest bit of the coolest bit of feedback I got when I said, there was an hour, we did some practical, talk to me about how I can make that better. And one of my students said, it would have been better if you'd have done more jokes through it, because it keeps me more engaged and lighter. And you went a bit serious during that, because I was full on going, do this, now do this, right, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do this. And I was so passionately communicating and joining in that I forgot that, most of the time I'm just, I'll throw in, an extraordinarily inappropriate comment at some point, and everyone will kind of break down momentarily, and then we'll push on. That's what made the difference in her educational experience, and it would have made it better had I kept it light for her learning. Isn't that cool? Her physical learning.
Yeah. And it's just that parallel that I have there of the scientific coach, the scientific trainer, explaining why the exercise is so good and going into detail and this exercise is the one that's going to give you all these things. And at the end of the day, it can fall so hard, or like it fall flat. It just doesn't land because we're not connecting with the people in front of us. And the biggest part of exercise that I love, and I think this is why I consistently come back to group exercise as something that I really love doing, is because it's less serious. I get to display my personality more. There's music, it's fun, and it's engaging. And even when I'm doing something as quote unquote boring as mat Pilates, there's a whole way for me to make it creative and fun and interesting, so that there's a connection there. Because if you're having a good time, if you're in a good mood, like you said, you're going to do, your performance just elevates so much more. So let's talk a little bit more about this, because you've mentioned flow state a couple of times now. So what do negative emotions like fear or anxiety do in the body, and then what do positive emotions do in the body?
So what I'll start off is by saying we need to feel all the emotions. Like there's no such thing as like a negative emotion; they're just emotions, right? So we cannot deny emotions, and there is such a thing as toxic positivity, right? So we can't say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinterpret this. No, just allow yourself to go there. And if you're in a really bad place, you need to fully visit that place and then come out of it. It's not a place that you stay forever. It's not a place you live. It's a place you visit. If you're finding you're almost putting down roots there, that's when you need to seek help, right? I talk about it as feeling the bounce. Don't fight the emotional state, and don't try and stop yourself from going there, because it's like you've fallen in the ocean. You're halfway to the bottom. You're far enough down so that the water pressure is pushing down upon you. You're fighting to go for the surface because you hate the thought of what might be down there and how scary that might be. So you fight. And what you do is you fight, and you're in purgatory and you drown, instead of just allowing yourself, give yourself to it, get to the bottom, feel the bounce, push off, and kick for home, right? This is how we're better. And by the way, do that with positive emotions too, right? Feel them and allow yourself to feel them. Don't go, and push them away because somehow it's arrogant to feel happy about your achievements. Feel the achievements. That's number one. Your question was around, let me just make sure I'm back on track again now. So that was a nice little tangent. I'm back in the room. You want to know why are emotions so important?
Yeah, and how's that felt in the body? How does that physically impact us?
Right. I lost you there for a moment.
That's all right. We'll go again. I want to know why emotions are important, not only for that emotional state, but how that affects you physically. So if you're experiencing, like you said, an emotion, just say we're anxious, what happens physically in the body with that? And when we're happy, what happens physically?
That's really good. So I would encourage everyone to look up, there's some really great charts. It would be emotional body mapping, and it's from a study that was from 2014 by Glerian et al. Glerean. Look at those body mapping charts. And what they've done is they've got people and they've asked them to color in on their bodies where they feel different emotions. And what I'd encourage everyone to do is look at depression and look at happiness. And to be honest with you, their definition of happiness, I would describe it as joy, right? So what we get is for darker negative emotions, they are darker colors. They're black and they're dark blue and things like that. They're cold colors. And then for positive, happy emotions, they are, reds and yellow being the brightest. So when you look at that, you'll see that anger, for example, is quite intense. It's actually, it's the intensity of the emotion rather than whether it's positive or negative. I kind of didn't describe that very well. But for anger, when you're really, really angry, well, anger was almost completely red from the chest up, all along the arms and into the head. So when you're angry, what are you ready for? You are ready to fight, aren't you? So it's like you're fired up, and you're ready to go. Really interesting. Whereas, there's an emptiness to depression, like almost a deactivation, the opposite of intensity. You've gone completely into this place where you feel very little in your physical body. Happiness is red and yellow from toe tips to fingertips. It's extraordinary. Now, what I would liken that to is they do chart love, but ironically, happiness trumps love when it comes to what you feel. But let's take everyone back or into the now with when they fall in love with someone. The early days of a relationship, and it's extraordinary, those feelings. And you think about them a lot, and the connection is amazing, and you are getting fulfilled and validated in every way you possibly could, and you are delivering that back to your partner. So that in that time, it's unusual for people to get sick. It's also unusual for them to be angry. Their behavior tends to be very helpful, very positive. The jokes tend to flow. They want to be all things to all people in their life. They're great at work. They sometimes will hit new personal records in various areas of their life. And it's because they are so very fulfilled throughout themselves. Now, that's not just their physical needs being met. That's their mental and emotional needs. That's fulfillment, effectively. And for that will mean that our interoceptive network is feeding back to the brain saying, everything is so damn good out here. Repair all the cells that you possibly could want because we've got the energy for it, and tell the whole body it's doing really, really great. Organs are functioning incredibly well, all through the system. So if ever you really want to go for personal records, fall in love with your clients. Okay, that's official right here from JP. So obviously, foster happiness with your clients. Please don't do what I just said. That's very much a joke. So, but what we want is how many of the markers can we affect in our sessions? How many of the, great, how can we affect, outside of the sessions too? Can we help them with education around water consumption, food consumption? Well, yeah, we can. But can we also help them with emotional, what would we call it? It's almost like emotional admin. How do they respond to stress? How might they think about things differently? Like, can we help them with that? And if not, is there someone that you can learn from, or a referral point where they can actually learn to manage themselves a lot better? Because most of the things that people interpret as fight or flight, because it's programmed into us, that's an inappropriate belief around the feelings that your interoceptors are telling you at that point in time.
I think if people are struggling a little bit with this concept, one of the best interpretations, like we've got the Olympics coming up, this episode will probably land right in it. And the athlete that is over aroused, they're anxious, they're too in their head, they're not enjoying the moment. You can see it in their body. They look tight, they look tense, they can't move well, and they're not going to get the performance. And on the flip side, when you see that athlete in flow, they're absorbing the happiness around them, the excitement, the ecstasy of the crowd, the good feelings, the journey that got them there. They have an ease about them. Everything is stacked and aligned, and it's ready. It's still primed.
Yeah.
But that's just such a quick comparison of physically how emotions will affect your body.
Absolutely. And I saw a video recently, and I can't remember the athlete's surname, but her first name was Kennedy, and she's constantly kind of posing for cameras, but in a comical way. She'll pull a face or something like that. And Usain Bolt, he used to do his little Bolt thing, but he his interactions with both media, i.e. camera, But also, even with a person on his blocks, he'd have a bit of a laugh and a joke with him because he was trying to maintain that space. So you can short circuit the system. You can adopt postures and you can adopt affect that then will take you further towards there as well. So I find myself, before I do any presentation, I'll get a little bit up and manic and jokey, and I have to bounce around a little bit because I've got all this kind of energy. So I go up just before a session. A lot of people I know have to go sit in the bathroom and just stress about what's about to happen. But you just manage whatever your response is. But power poses, mainly, like I talk about posture in the course, actually, like what do power poses do and how they change the chemical composition in your body. But absolutely, like the way we manage ourselves will affect all outcomes, and also, ironically, our level of happiness. Those things will interact with each other, affect each other. So one will drive the other, which will therefore drive the one in the first place. Again, that's they call it autotelic. It's an end in itself, and that's very much. I know we mentioned flow state a couple of times now, but it's very much what happens in flow state. The very act of being there keeps you there.
That's cool. Now I have about 75 more questions, which I'm not going to get to, sadly.
Pick your good ones. There's probably a load of ballast there, probably a load of rubbish that you probably wrote down. You know what you're like, Ness. You get carried away. Just pick the good one.
All right. The question, I think this will lead into another question. So I'm going to ask this one first. We ask this of all of our guests who come on to the pod. If it was Rainbow Land, I'm getting excited. I smacked my microphone. If it was Rainbow Land, and you could change absolutely anything in the health and fitness industry without consequence, what would you change right now?
I would do a full flip on what is mainstream and what is alternative, because I believe all the alternative stuff is the mainstream and is how we're designed to function. And all the traditional is an add-on, a bolt-on niche if you want to go down that road. Said it out loud. So there. That's
great. Such a great answer and so well explained. That's really awesome. It's not as controversial as some of our guests previously. I actually think that that's a really beautiful summation of what could happen in our industry in Rainbow Land.
I think it will be, but it will be like 100 years time, and then they'll be looking back like on my old courses like, oh look. He was there at that point in time, and he was saying it then. He was saying it back then, but I'll be Ash at that point in time.
Kind of like what we're doing with Chinese medicine at the moment.
Yeah.
So my last question then, for people who are interested in exploring interoception, exploring how emotions and where their body is in space and how their body is feeling. They want to explore this with movement. What are some good first steps for them to take?
So for me, it's flip what you think are the benefits of movement and put a new question at the top. And it's, what do you enjoy the most? That's the first category, the most important category, rather than what will give you the best responses for the goals that you are chasing. Make it, what do you absolutely enjoy the most? I have an interesting message on my screen saying that we've lost connection.
Hello? I don't know if that's me or if that's you. We might have to do that question again. Hold tight.
Well, that was weird.
That was so weird. I have no idea what happened there. Do you remember what my question was?
Yeah, so you were saying what can we do for exercise experiences? And
okay. Yes. I'm going to ask the question again.
Well,
sorry about that.
That was so weird.
It was so weird.
We were going so well.
I know. Okay. All right. So if people are interested in exploring this space of interoception and understanding how their emotional state has an impact physically on their body, where's a good place to start, or what are some first steps to take?
I would just put it into Google and say, tell me about interoception, and AI will do a great job for you in terms of describing it, just so you get a sense of what it is, and then go to your scholarly type stuff if you really want a lot more of the science. So that will be number one in terms of just familiarize yourself with it. Of course, I have a course if you want to kind of go into it more for movers, but that's by the by. And then when it comes to how you go about it in your job, you can start doing something without knowing anything. And that would just be, as your number one marker for whether you're doing a good exercise session or not, the number one importance is whether your clients enjoy what they're doing with you. So look at each, literally go through it exercise by exercise if you want, and say, based upon enjoyment, score this exercise out of 10 for me. And if they're in the 5s all the time, you can make direct changes. Does it have to come from you though? No, I would advise it comes from them. So how do you do that? Well, okay then, so we're on a 5. How do I make it a 7? What needs to change? And they'll tell you. They'll have ideas immediately. They won't have thought about it before, but they'll say, well, you know, well, one person just wanted to wrestle me, like during a squat. Like if we did a kind of a, you know, if I could push you around a little bit whilst I was doing my squats, that would make it from a 5 to a 10. And I'm like, well, okay then, push me around. And so then I started scoring them on how hard they were pushing, and then that made them even happier, because then I'd start going, well, that was an 8 out of 10. You can do better than that. And then so each time they came up, they were pushing, and it was amazing. Like it went from I don't want to do this to how often can we do this, right? Make it so that it's enjoyable. And go through each one and then go, okay, then. So if something's consistently a 2, look at something else that will give the same physical response, but is far more enjoyable. But normally it's a tweak. It's the type of music you play when you're doing it. It's what it's combined with. And as I say, God, something, if they're bored because they're on their 100,000th set of squats, just throw a ball on each rep. Something like that. Let them just do throw and respond. You know, there's such simple ideas that you can use to completely transform the way you're doing it. Anyway, what you want to do is give them experiences. You have a brand called Exercise to Experience. You know all this already, but you give them experiences that are really enjoyable. That then all outcomes will improve, including their mental and emotional, but definitely their physical outcome will improve because they enjoy it more. I was listening to a book just a couple of weeks ago, Joe Dispenza, and he had a thing that he quoted from Yale University. He must be 30 years old, and all the benefits of exercise were present in these 2 groups. They got actors to put themselves in negative, angry, frustrated emotional states and joyful, happy emotional states. All the benefits of exercise were like massively inflated in the happy group and really limited in the frustrated, angry group. That's just based purely upon their emotional state in the exercise experience, right? So we can change that. Every single session we do, we can change that. So let's do that. Let's make enjoyment of exercise the most important thing. Then whether it hits all the parameters and the goals and where you want to go and what you need to change after that.
Yeah, I love that so much. And immediately my brain goes to all the skeptics out there who immediately go, but you're not going to get results. You know what gets results? People showing up and doing the things again and again and again. And if they don't show up, doesn't matter how good your program is, they're not going to do it. They have to want to do it.
Oh, true.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you've said there. There are some links to you, to your courses, to your information, and some of the books that you've mentioned as well in the show notes. So please check them out. We will add them all in. Thank you so much, JP. For sure, there'll be a round 2 for the 74 other questions that I still have for you.
It's been a pleasure. I feel like the time has evaporated very, very quickly.
Yes. All right. Thank you.